The Alabama Booksmith presents Author Spotlight. Because every book in our store is signed, our wall of fame displays a breathtaking array of writers and signatures. Close-up shots reveal giants of literature, acclaimed historians, stars of stage and screen, our nation's leaders, famous sports heroes, and thousands of other esteemed authors. Today's Wall of Fame guest is T.K. Thorne, who will discuss her new book, Behind the Magic Curtain. And here is T.K. Thorne with our host, Jake Reese.
Welcome, T.K. Thorne. It's so good to have you here. We've missed you. And welcome to our audience. For those of you meeting T.K. for the first time, she is the award-winning author of 5 books and served on the Birmingham police force for more than 20 years, retiring with the rank of captain. She had inside connections providing information for this truly behind-the-scenes view of some of the most important aspects of the entire civil rights movement. TK has been working on this book for more than 10 years. Readers will discover just remarkable acts of heroism for many of these folks who risked so much. Their story has gone untold since the 1960s. TK, much of the inside information for Behind the Magic Curtain was provided by Tom Langford, a reporter for the Birmingham News. The book opens while Langford is still a journalism student at the University of Alabama. Will you tell us about Langford's first run-in with the Ku Klux Klan?
I'd be happy to, and let me pause and say it's so good to be here with you. Oh. Thank you for inviting me. He heard about a Klan sign on the outskirts of the campus, and heard that students had been sneaking out at night and painting over the sign. And so he knew it was a story, and he went after it. And he was driving his car, which was very precious to him, out to that sign, and the Klan was apparently waiting in wait for him or whoever would come out there, probably for the students that were throwing paint on the signs. But they caught him, and they forced him off the road and to stop, and then the Klan crowded in on him. And this is very typical of Tom. He said his chief concern was his camera. But they almost beat him, but the head of the Klan, United Klan of America, Robert Shelton, happened to be with them. And he realized that Tom was a reporter rather than a student with paint. And he took his film, handed him $1.
Wow.
And told him to go back and tell the students that they were trying to help them.
Wow.
But that little incident probably saved Tom's life later on.
Well, I was going to say that escapade also tells readers what to expect as Langford graduates and goes to the news, the state's most powerful newspaper, back in the heyday of newspapers. And your guy, Langford, turned out to take over the police beat. To also set the stage for your book, we need to know about the man who ran the paper, Vincent Townsend, Who was Vincent Townsend?
Vincent Townsend was one of those very powerful men who had a reach far beyond the newspaper. In fact, the FBI had sort of a standing order for any new agent in charge that came into town needed to go talk to Vincent Townsend first.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think politics probably checked in with him to see if they could get his support. So everybody respected him, and he ran the newspaper, every bit of it. And the thing that blew my mind when I first learned about it was that the newspaper in those days put out 5 editions a day.
I didn't realize that. I was here, but I forgot that.
Yeah, and so he did not rest. He was a whirlwind of energy and motion and inspiration, apparently.
Well, one of his Townsend's early orders to Langford was to befriend Bull Connor, the infamous police commissioner, and this worked to the degree that Bull gave Tom Langford many opportunities to scoop the competition, the Post-Herald. And one of the more sensational scoops was Tom Langford was given first shot at the horrible beatings administered by the Klan to the Freedom Riders. Would you please describe that melee and what happened when the mob seized Langford?
Connor had given Langford a heads up to wait in his office, and he and Bud Gordon, who was another photographer at the News, waited and waited all day until the bus arrived, and then Connor said go. He took a lot of pictures, and one of the Klansmen realized what he was doing, and they jumped on him, as they had all the news people that had come to the scene. And they drug him down an alley with bloody chains ready, and were about to beat him, possibly kill him. And guess who showed up?
Oh, give me a name.
Well, it was actually not the leader of the Klan at that time, but because of that, because he was known to be Connor's man, one of the Klansmen, who was actually an informant for the FBI, grabbed the Klansman just as he had hauled off to strike and said, "No, that's Connor's man." Wow. And so they pulled him into another secluded part of the alley and got his film, and just like what happened with Robert Shelton, they gave him $1 for the film and his camera. It was very ironic.
Back in those days, $1 went a long way.
I guess it did. So that was what happened to him.
Well, that's an amazing story. While Behind the Magic Curtain documents every important aspect of the movement, including demonstrations and police dogs and fire hoses and many bombings, including, of course, the horrific killing of the 4 innocent little girls and the subsequent trials and convictions, all of which led to the passing of monumental legislation and rescinding of previous Jim Crow laws. My reading of your important book is that its core is identifying those white citizens who risked, some of them risked everything to stand up to the injustices of the time, and we realize it's impossible to recognize everyone in the book during this short chat, may we select a representative handful to serve as a teaser. So all of those watching will run to get a copy of the book themselves to see who helped, shall we say, carry the load. And in no specific order, would you give us, in a few words, tell us about, let's start with, say, Carl Friedman and his law partner and very close friend and my friend, J. Mason Davis.
Sure. Carl Friedman was one of the men who asked me to write this book.
Oh.
And I didn't know him at the time, and I came to know him and really to respect him a lot and to be fond of him. He was that kind of person you just couldn't help.
Uncle Bubba.
Uncle Bubba, yes, that's what he told me to call him that too. He personally spent many, many hours working on legislation and lawsuits for the NCCA.
At great risk.
ACP, excuse me.
At great risk to himself.
Of course, and on a personal level, he offered friendship to blacks.
Give us a few words about Mason Davis, J.
Mason Davis was a young black lawyer in Birmingham, and he went to school in New York for law school because the state of Alabama was trying to get black people to not go to the University of Alabama or local law schools, and hopefully they would not come back after they got a law degree somewhere else. So they encouraged that by helping them pay for out-of-state school.
There's an Alabama scholarship that's in it.
Yes, sort of. So when he came back to town and was a brand new attorney, he walked into the courtroom for the first time, and he recognized Carl Friedman. And Friedman and another person, Alan Heldman, took him under their wing and showed him the court procedures and things that that a new lawyer needed to know, but wasn't going to get from most of the white attorneys in town. And they developed a long-term friendship because some of the restaurants wouldn't let black people go eat there. They would meet in the basement of the courthouse and eat out of the vending machine. And they developed a long-term friendship, and eventually J. Mason Davis became a partner at Friedman's law firm, Cerroti.
While we're talking about lawyers, I guess one that was well known that wasn't so much behind the scenes, Abe Berkowitz. Give us a few words about what that gentleman did.
I am so sorry that he was not alive when I was doing this, because I would have loved to talk to him. Abe Berkowitz was very outspoken. He represented black clients. He was an attorney. He played a leadership role in so many things. He was a member of the YMBC, which at that time was the Young Men's Business Club, a club of very progressive young lawyers who had aged out of the JCs. And they took on changing the city's government, and he was a leader there. He helped the relatively small group of black and white people who met and tried to do something about racism in Birmingham. His efforts early on included trying to get the state the state legislators to recall the Klan's charter. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, I don't want to talk about just lawyers, but there's one more lawyer I would appreciate you sharing a little bit about, and that's Miss Nina Miljaniko.
Miss Nina, I did have the privilege to know, and she was also a character, for sure. Miss Nina was one of the first counselors, city council members, in 1963 after Bull Connor was finally outed, or ousted, not outed. And she was a fireball of women's rights, and she supported black equality. In fact, and that 1963 was the year that you mentioned that all the Jim Crow laws were overturned at one time, and I believe that was probably the only place in the nation that happened like that. And Miss Nina was involved in that, but she was so outspoken and such a force that of all the counselors, she was the one to find a bomb on her front porch from the Klan. And her father was able to
defuse the bomb.
Thank you, defuse the bomb.
Wow, that is it's going to be hard for our viewers to understand. We're trying to talk about showing today what we have to face to speak truth to power, but I don't think many of us are going to expect a bomb on our front porch, and that's what Miss Nina and Carl Friedman and so many of the people in your book, their homes were bombed. They were threatened to be killed, as well as their families.
Yeah, Carl Friedman went home one day and found a bullet hole in his living room window.
Someone whom I know, still around, tell us just a little bit about that brave Virginia Volca.
She is and was a very brave woman. When she was a student at the University of well, actually, it was the School of Medicine at that time. Here, it is now known as UAB. When she was in school, she was meeting with other black young people to try to develop relationships and see what could be done. And she was stopped by the police once on her way home, and there was one of the black workers was in the car with her, and the police were not friendly to her. And when she got to school the next day, she was called into her, I guess her dean's office or someone that was over the school or over that part of the school that she was studying, and told her people weren't ready. And she said, well, if not now, when?
She was and is a pistol. I guess I'd like to go down all of the hundreds of names and people you recognize and pay tribute to, and I think that's what stuck with me there was so much about your book, but I loved finding out about people I've known since I've been in Birmingham. But let's, we can't go down the list without former Mayor David Vann. What did
we have so many characters back then?
Tell the audience about David Vann.
Well, David Vann ended up being mayor of Birmingham, but prior to that, he was a young lawyer, and I was kind of surprised to read that he was very behind the scenes in his early years. It was David Vann who figured out how to get a vote on changing the city government, which was the only way they could do to get Bull Connor out of office. And he had a brilliant idea.
And it worked?
And it worked, yeah.
Well, we must tell our audience that this was just a sprinkling of names that we mentioned, a tiny preview of the brave souls who spoke up and acted up in very dangerous times.
And if I may, not only was it dangerous times for them, but as some of the black activists pointed out, these people were not acting on behalf of themselves, and they had everything to lose. So, you know, this time in our history is a story of many people, black and white. But I think, you know, we shouldn't dismiss the white people that stood up.
Well, and I think that was dismissed, and I think many of us who were fairly close to it didn't realize how many white people did stand up and what they risked. And maybe after folks read your book, they will be encouraged to do something similar in these dangerous times. I know after reading your book, I am moved to, well, first of all, I'm so sorry that I did not acknowledge the people I knew, but I didn't know what they had done. I wish I'd read your book 20, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, but I've made a vow after reading your book to say something to the ones who are still with us and the children and grandchildren of those who are no longer with us. However, you're not getting out of here so easy. I started to say we're through with the hard questions, but we solicited questions and comments, and I'm blown away. First of all, I've got a complex. Some of these questions are a lot more thoughtful than the ones we came up with, but I'm going to ask you to quickly, without going into too much detail, give us an answer, if you will, if you can, some of these quickly, some are so thought-provoking, to the questions your fans have sent in. And I'm going to start with the first one. And obviously, folks, we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but we'll go as quickly as we can. This one is from Nina Donath, and she says, you wrote Last Chance for Justice, which holds a place on my office bookshelf. I enjoyed that book so much for its investigative reporting. Great question coming. How does Behind the Magic Curtain differ or intersect with the themes and concepts in Last Chance for Justice?
In Last Chance for Justice, I focused on the 16th Street Church bombing, and that book was written from the investigator's perspective on that case. But that's, and this book, Behind the Magic Curtain, is a lot broader. But of course, that bombing played a significant part. And the one thing that people don't think about, that I learned in writing that book and talking to the investigators, was the thing that finally got the Klan convicted was the testimony of white people.
Good point. Yes. Didn't think about it, of course.
You don't think about it, but they at great risk to themselves. And one man showed up on an oxygen tank in a wheelchair with his doctor, but he insisted on coming.
Got a question from Dan Katz, and Dan, you make me jealous. I wish I had thought of this. TK, Dan wants to know, love this, Dan, what reactions are you hoping for from those readers who lived through this?
That is an excellent question. I'm hoping that they feel like I did a little bit of justice to them and their stories.
And that's part A. Part B, God, it's so good. Dan, you try to take my job. The part B is, what reactions are you hoping for from those who did not live through this period?
I think I hope that they would be inspired, as you mentioned, to understand that they have an opportunity here to not be silent.
Don Stewart has an incredible question, and you could take the next couple of hours answering this question. I love it. Do you think that people of color working together with the intermittent assistance of well-meaning white people will eventually facilitate the advent of racial equality, or is white supremacy a Western European disease that needs to be recognized and addressed within the white community? Whew.
That's quite a question. Yes, no, yes, no.
There you go, Don.
There you go. What my heart and gut tell me is that in the 60s, racism was so easily identified. I mean, it was codified into our law. It was evident in every social, you had white and colored entrances to buildings, separate water fountains, separate ways to handle the dead, separate ambulances, medical. There were so many ways. It was so obvious. Today, it is not as obvious what keeps us from that equality. It's buried in our past, it's buried in our laws, it's buried in our education system in a lot of ways. And I believe that it's going to take all of us. It's going to take black people explaining to us where the racism lies and where their barriers are. And it's going to take white people it's going to take people working together. So I say it's going to take all of us, and it's more complicated than it seems.
Well said, well said. Clara Datdow wants to know, and I love this question. I should have taken these questions before we started the interview. What is the common character trait that enables people to speak out against injustice despite the threat of recrimination?
Wow, that's
great question.
And you want me to answer that in one or two sentences?
I'd love to. I can't wait to hear your answer.
I think it's a combination of internal and external factors. Internal factors would be those that shape a person's value system. It would be their own proclivity to speak up and speak out. It would be those character type of qualities. Externally, I think it makes a difference when people have a support system. And that is either family, friends, community. It's much more difficult to speak out when you're the only one. And that's because we are social creatures, and our minds are constructed and built that way.
Well, that's somewhat a segue into the next question from Alina Stefanescu. And I can't imagine this answer. I'd love to know if there is music involved, if any local bands or musical places served as inspiration or impetus for these allies?
I love that question. And that was one of the fun things that I discovered. And the answer to that is yes.
Oh, come on.
No, absolutely. Music was the magic that brought black and white together, especially youth.
I know where you go, of course. And one of the bandmasters was
Stewart.
Shelley
Stewart, yeah.
Our man Shelley.
Yeah, and he did parties where he would play records. Terrific. And the black and white kids would come and dance, and at one instance the Klan came after him at one of those disc parties, and when it was announced that the Klan was waiting for Shelley Stewart, all of his little young fans ran out into the parking lot and put themselves between the Klan and Shelley Stewart so he could get away.
What a great sideline. Thank you. That surprised me. Oh boy. Sue Walker in Mobile. Dear Sue, you reveal in what is behind the magic curtain what the parallels may be between 1963, 64, 65 and 2020, 2021. What do you predict, old fortune teller, in terms of change for 2031, 32, as if novelist Marge Piercy says, the past walks through the present?
I love that. The past does walk through the present, and we need to listen to it, because otherwise it will become our present or our future. And I can't predict, but what I do know is that we are on a precipice right now in history. And this is a time when people need to stand up and make decisions as to which way we will go and where we will end up in 2031.
Well, these questions have been, and we're running out of time, but there are a couple of comments that came in I do want to share with you and with the audience. The book is not only a wonderful historical analysis, and this is from Richard Friedman. Thank you, Richard, for taking time to send this comment. The book is not only a wonderful historical analysis, it challenges the reader to think more deeply about the state of race relations in our community today. Well said, Richard. I wish I'd thought of that. And let's take one more. Ramey Chanel. Can't wait to read this. Birmingham's civil rights issues have been a compelling force my entire life, due to, in part, to family stories and histories. T.K. Thorne is a gifted and impressive writer, and well qualified to write about and offer insight into Birmingham's turbulent past. So well said, Ramey, and thank you to all of these folks, and oh my goodness, thank you, T.K. Thorne. This is awesome, and your book is awesome. Thank you for your insights and for such a marvelous book.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And let us say we assume that even the most knowledgeable civil rights scholars will be enlightened with the revelations in this book. And you may add signed first editions of Behind the Magic Curtain to your library, or send copies to friends and family by going to alabamabooksmith.com.